You are listening to the Heartland Author Podcast. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For today's episode, I had the opportunity to interview Chris Riker. Chris is a former CNN International journalist who is now an author. Chris has written the works of fiction Come the Eventide, Zebulon Angell and the Shadow Army, and Goody Celeste. Chris also wrote the book Skinner's A Love Story under the pen name C.W. Riker. I'm here with Chris Riker, who is a former CNN journalist who is now the author of 3 books. Chris, welcome to the Heartland Author Podcast.
Well, hey, Aaron, thank you for having me. Actually, I hate to correct you right off the bat. I have been so darn busy. It's not 3 books, it's 4 that are out there, and there's another one coming.
Okay, I apologize.
Once you catch the bug, you got to keep going.
All righty. Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, my name is Chris Riker. I am a journalist or veteran journalist. I was with CNN International for 5 years. Worked with people like Relitsa Vasilova, Jim Clancy, Riz Khan. They might know those names. Mike Moore. I also worked locally in Atlanta at WSB and other stations. So I have approximately 25, 30 years. It's hard to tell because there are some down times, in that career. I have about 30 years of journalism, mostly in television. And then I decided that the writing that I was going to do should be in a more serious form. So I started to try to write creatively again. I had done it a few times over the years, no particular things to mention. But about 5, 6 years ago, I got the bug again. There was this silly little contest, write a Star Trek fan story. So I did, put it in for submission, didn't win. But I kept going, and I wrote another short story. My 3rd short story changed something. Something clicked inside my head. And it was supposed to be a silly little story about dolphins and octopuses. It was going to be this ridiculously simple story about Octopus's Garden, like the Ringo song. And the characters in the story said, dude, this is not a short story. You have got a novel to write. And I let them tell me what the novel was, and they did. So if you think writers are crazy, or if you just think I'm crazy, you're probably right. When the characters speak to you, you have to listen.
I'm going to talk about your books in the next question, but what was your experience at working at CNN like, and what was your experience working at WSB Television in Atlanta? I believe Glenn Burns was the chief meteorologist there for many years.
Oh, yes. Yeah, okay. Well, I worked at, trying to remember the order of things, yes, because I worked at Channel 2 twice, a total of 7 years. The first time I was there, it was Monica Kaufman and Don Farmer who were the anchors. This is in the early-ish 90s to the mid-90s. It is an eye-opener. I had done some radio news. I don't have to back up. I wanted to go out to California and be a Hollywood producer. Well, aside from not having even enough money to hitchhike across country, I needed to eat. I'm addicted to food. I eat 2, 3 meals a day sometimes. So I had to do something, and it turns out that I could make a living in the news business. So I did radio for a while, and then I jumped over to TV, which was Channel 2. This was an eye-opening experience. The pace of it, I believe it's gotten faster. The pace of it is just crazy. You have to turn these stories. You have to make sure that they're accurate. You have to make sure they're compelling, and you have to keep doing it, for 8, 9, 10 hours a day. So that was one thing. And another is just, there's a certain excitement when you have people out there depending on you to know what's going. You're their eyes. I think today unlike when I started today, people have a certain suspicion about the media. Honestly, that's not the way to look at it. If you think your media, one particular outlet is favoring this political part of the spectrum or that political part of the spectrum, you know what you do? You get more than one piece of media and you compare notes. You don't simply dismiss or make fun of. I think we've lost that. Not to get too political too quickly, but I think it's the audience. Stop yelling at the media. They're doing their job. Even Fox News, which I don't particularly care for and do believe is propaganda, I think they're doing their job. But how do you take that? You don't just watch Fox. You watch a variety of media and you compare the notes. How did they see this incident? How did this one look at it? At Channel 2, back in the 90s, and again, my second stint there was early teens, I honestly never, ever was told what to write or which stories that I must or must not cover. So please don't tell me that it's biased. I think that you don't stay in that business working under that pressure for more than 5 minutes unless you have a genuine hunger to get the truth out there. And there are checks and balances. So I honestly, Channel 2 was the best of Atlanta, and I believe it still is. As far as TV news, there are some other fine news outlets, but also CNN. Now, I know people have criticisms about CNN. Am I a defender? Absolutely. Should you watch only CNN? Of course not. Go online, watch a little Fox News if you must. There are others out there. Compare the notes. So I moved from Channel 2 to CNN in 1996 through 2001. I left just before 9/11. But this was a bigger stage. I was bumming around the CNN studios because they have a number of different networks, of course, until I landed at CNN International. A friend had recommended me. I sat there for just a couple of days, and I get a message, please come to my office. And it's from Ted Iliff, who was then basically the head of CNN International. And I'm thinking, oh God, what could I possibly have done in 2 days to get myself fired? So I go and I sit down in his office and I'm ready for it. I'm ready for the big hammer to come down on my head. And he said, you know, people have come back to me and said time and again already, you got to hire this guy. His writing is just too good. I'm like, wow. It remains the compliment of my career. I hold that moment whenever I feel bad about something else. I look back at that moment in my head and think, you know what? You can write. There are a lot of things I can't do. Do not make me your doctor. You do not want this, but I can write. I can do this thing. And that spark continued on for years and years. Eventually, I had to nurture it into trying to become an author. And now I have, much to my own surprise, 5 completed novels. 4 of them are out there, and the 5th is coming out soon.
Without spoiling too much of your books, Come the Eventide, Zebulon Angell, and the Shadow Army, and Goody Celeste, what are each of those about, and what's the 4th one that's published, and what's the 5th one that's coming out?
Okay. Out of order, the 4th one, the one that's missing from that list, I published under a different name, C.W. Riker, instead of Chris Riker. It was just an experiment, just to see if I needed a second pseudonym. Anyway, let's take them in order, because there is something that I'm discovering as I'm writing. And I think it's important for authors to discover, what the heck are you writing about? What are you writing about? So in Come the Eventide, this is the one that was about the octopus's garden that turned into a novel because the character said, you must write more. And as I wrote it, they told me what it had to be about. Come the Eventide finds an octopus named Septiel who has a dream. It is the future. It is a century after the fall. That is the fall of mankind. Human beings in the beginning of the book are just kind of a rumor. We're dead. We're gone. It's the end of the world. Septiel is dealing with an underwater world that is broken apart because there are vast parts of the ocean that are unlivable. But she dreams up a way to draw maps in a new way that allows people to allows dolphins, octopuses, other sentient underwater creatures to maybe reclaim large portions of the ocean. She has an adventure. The book goes on. We jump then. Lo and behold, there are human survivors. They live on an island called Gun Island. They are a small conclave of humanity. And the dolphins, who are now the main protagonists of the overall plot, the dolphins make contact and try to steer them away from a coming war with the salvers. And the salvers are basically pirates who go around on these giant Disney cruise ships, or one giant Disney cruise ship. And they are looking to cause trouble and steal all the remaining resources. But the dolphins are the ones who realize you can't keep fighting. You must not keep fighting. So they are the peacemakers. That is Come the Eventide. And I thought that was going to be my only novel. And then I did something. I know I'm talking about me. Isn't this fascinating? I'm talking about me, but this is for other authors. I did something incredibly healthy. I joined a writer's group. It turns out there was one near my home. I got to see them before the pandemic. We got to meet face to face, and then as the pandemic hit, we started to do the Zoom thing. Anyway, with their support, I threw out a few short stories, and then I came along and decided, okay, I'm going to try a novel again. This may not work, but I'm going to give it a try. And that is Zebulon Angell and the Shadow Army. There is a place called Zebulon, Georgia, in Pike County. If you don't know who Zebulon Pike is, don't feel ashamed, but he was a president. Pike's Peak is also named after him. Anyway, Zebulon is just a terrible name for a modern person. So he hates his name. He hates a lot of things about it. Lo and behold, it's me. And Zebulon told me that he is me, and we have to go and recreate my path through his adventures. So Zebulon Angell, I'll just throw this out there. It's neither here nor there. I'm a recovering alcoholic who's not had a drink in 21 years. Zebulon Angell is a little earlier on that journey. He's still drinking, and his life is a mess. He is a dreamer. He is someone who can't quite get it started. He wants to be a country western music writer. He is stuck driving Uber cars, which I've done. And he is married to a brilliant woman who's come up with this sex candy. This sex candy has drawn the attention of some big money backers, and they need someone to go off to Asia and be the spokesman for this sex candy, and that's Zebulon Angell. So he gets a chance for some real money, some real prominence. So of course he blows it and messes up. We follow him through kind of an unraveling process. The more success he gets, the more he messes it up. He winds up, and you have to read the book to understand how. I promise it makes sense if you read the book. He winds up falling into the tomb of China's first emperor and meeting the ghost of Emperor Qin. That is Zebulon Angell and the Shadow Army. The next one up is Skinner's A Love Story. I just decided to try horror. I wanted to see what I could come up with. Zebulon Angell also starts in Atlanta. Skinner's starts in Atlanta too. I've decided that I should write about places, for the most part, that I've actually gotten to know fairly well. So Skinner's is set in Atlanta, where they are filming a Gothic TV show, kind of a dark shadows for the 2020s. There are ghosts and goblins and haunted Nazis and all these other weird things going on set. Well, behind the scenes, there are these shapeshifters, and they are taking over people. So it's real life horror on the set of a horror series being shot. And these Skinners turn out to be an ancient race who have the ability to take on the forms of the living. It goes along. It takes on some of my favorite themes. I'll get to that in just a second. And number 4 is Goody Celeste. That's the new one. Goody Celeste takes us to Rhode Island in 1969, which is roughly my youth. I did grow up in Rhode Island. My character is a little bit older than I was because I wanted to hit 1969 specifically because it's the moon landing. And I love that moment. So I kind of reshaped the book around that. Goody Celeste is the name of an enigmatic woman who turns out to be a witch, a Wiccan. I leave it to you, the reader, to decide whether her magic is actually spooky, weird magic, or whether she is indulging in human magic. And this gets me to my theme. I find ways to explore it more in each book. She is a purveyor of human magic. She helps 3 young boys deal with certain issues of their life and also face a bad guy. The book is, of course, set in Rhode Island. It has vinegar on French fries. It has classic cars. It has a trip to Newport. Without spoiling too much, they find a famous 1969 star playing at the Newport Folk Festival. All sorts of wonderful references, which, of course, I remember a lot of it, but I did have to go back and research my own history to learn more about my home state. The book has a fun plot, but I wanted to get back to the theme, which is human magic. And this is what I've found is growing in my writing. Again, to the authors out there, what are you writing about? I am apparently, to my own surprise, I am writing about something. I'm writing about human magic. There are other ways to look at it. I have discovered for myself a worldview that I do not feel comfortable with most of the established religion in the world. It feels centuries out of place. And I also have come to the belief that no belief system should be fixed in place. Human beings aren't like that. We move around in our minds. We approach the world differently from day to day. So what I'm holding on to is a simplified version. Everything comes down not necessarily to good versus evil, heaven versus hell, because that's a little melodramatic, a little Middle Ages. But it does come down to selfishness versus empathy. And human magic is another term for empathy. If we care about each other, there is no problem that we cannot solve. If, on the other hand, and I'm going to try to clean up my language here, if, on the other hand, Earth is nothing more than a planet of 8 billion buttholes, we're doomed. And good riddance. If that's the best we can manage as human beings, is to each say, me first, and no, you don't get to go at all. It's just me. There are people who espouse this, and I'm afraid in America, at least, and I think the world, we tend to rise them up to celebrity status, to almost godlike status. We love the billionaires. Why? These are not people who made anything. They bought these things. In some cases, they buy things and then ruin them. But why do we love celebrities, billionaires, stars? What about the people in our own lives? Can't we put this effort into our own communities? This would be human magic. So I could go on about that. I won't because
Yeah, I'm just going to let you know that I've got 6 questions left to ask, and you've only got about 2 or 3 minutes for each question.
okay, okay. Well, that's fine. Move on to the next question.
How long did it take you to write each of your books?
My first book took 18 months. Um, and I guess the authors asked, do you outline or do you pants it? Fly by the seat of your pants. I had a little of both. I knew early on where it started and where it finished, and I knew that it was breaking into 4 sections, the first book, that were completely different setups, although living in the same universe. That all made sense, but I still had to take it pretty much one scene at a time. Um, and then after that, the process, for some reason, just got easier. And it now takes me probably, if I was being honest, I could sit down and do the thing in 4 months easily. But I have a life, I have to earn money. So it takes me 5, 6, 7 months to do a book.
As Amazon is a major player in the book retail industry, and you'll probably have to put a filter on yourself here for this one. What are your thoughts about Amazon?
Okay, you can use a variety, a whole suite of bleep noises. No, I won't cuss. I'll try not to. What do I think of Amazon? Amazon sold people on the idea that they too would be celebrities. This is a false idea. This is a false idea. The odds are no better than, being picked up by the NBA. Yes, it happens to some people, and of course, when it happens, you hear about it. But for the most part, books go to Amazon to die. They have preposterous metric systems. Oh, your book is #1 on a list of books written by left-handed authors on a rainy Tuesday afternoon that talk about talking dolphins. Great! I'm #1. There's nothing that Amazon doesn't do to cloud the matter. And they don't do the things they need to do. They don't promote. They don't, with the money he's got, with the money Bezos has, he should be helping authors go out and promote their books. But Amazon doesn't even want to be in books anymore because Bezos gets bored. The problem is the sheer numbers. Thanks to Amazon, there are something like 3 to 4 million books per year being published. How many do you have time for? I try to be a good reader, but I don't know that I even hit 20 books in a year. I try. I certainly can't hit 4 million. And there's no filter. There's no point at which somebody says, your grammar is just so poor that we can't publish your book. I've read some of the ones that honestly needed a copy editor. A lot of them need the copy editor, and a lot of them need somebody to say no, or to say maybe this is a local regional book, but not something for the national audience. There needs to be a whole lot more concern for the quality of the books. But there isn't, and there never will be, because Bezos only cares about making money, and he only cares about making it for Bezos. So, okay, there's my filter.
Okay. Are all your books self-published, traditionally published, hybrid published, or did you use different publishing types for your books?
No, they're all self-published. I use different publishing platforms. I'm very fond of my first one, which I went back to for Goody Celeste. That is BookLogix in Alpharetta, Georgia. They did some things Now, you can't do this forever because everything costs money, but they did some things that I absolutely appreciated. They told me this chunk here does not work. Get rid of it. And I had to go through that experience for the first time. What do you mean my baby is ugly? Well, yeah. Wouldn't it be great if Amazon did that, worked with their authors? But this is becoming less and less of the thing. When you read about the great stories of publishing and you read about, um, I don't know, To Kill a Mockingbird, Harper Lee's publisher looked at her and said, this is a nice story about this Southern um, lawyer that you've got here, but wouldn't it be cool if you wrote it from the kid's point of view? And she rewrote and gave us the classic that we have. That's the publishers, the editors' input. I don't think 99.999% of the authors get that. I think a few of them do, but there's another downside to it. If you write a book and it's a hit, you better be prepared to write that same book for the rest of your life because they simply will not publish anything different. The business model needs to change. Will it? No, of course not, because there's money. But it needs to change. Somebody could make a fortune or at least be a hero by coming out, helping authors develop their art. And if they can make money, great, but at least helping them sell a few books.
What authors influence your writing, and where do you get your story ideas?
The story ideas come to me because I'm crazy. No, they're bits and pieces of life that rework themselves into story form. I find that I like magic realism quite a bit. And for those who don't have an exact definition, you're not alone. A lot of publishers don't really know what it is either. They say, oh, yes, that's Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Yes, he popularized part of it, but he didn't originate it. Magic realism, to my mind, is a normal place and time, normal characters with something going on that's outside the natural order. And I love that. I absolutely love it. We have, as far as authors, I love Ray Bradbury, first love. The man never went to college, but you'd never know it. He had a lot of things going for him, including a smart wife. There are a number of literary references throughout Bradbury, and that's his wife. She's saying, oh, you're writing this story? Go to the library and read this book. And he would, and then he would mention it in the story. I also love the writings of Umberto Eco. People will maybe be familiar with The Name of the Rose, but he had 7, 8 novels over the course of his life, and they're all magnificent. He takes on sacred cows and makes hamburger. He is a big parodyist. Is that the right word? He parodies religion quite a bit, and that's fantastic. But he does it so well. He was a scholar, and he's not a lightweight when it comes to making his case. I love Haruki Murakami. Got to get better at speaking. Who has done Kafka on the Shore, 1Q84, a number of other fine books. We have magic realism throughout his work, but it's got a Japanese lens on it. And I'm still learning from him. I'm learning his tricks. If I like an author, if I love an author, yes, I'm going to steal their tricks. I will not steal their ideas. I will not plagiarize, but I will steal their tricks. And I'm still learning Murakami's. And I love Ian M. Banks, which is probably the most like Star Trek for anybody who's shopping for Star Trek in novel forms. He has his Culture series. I think his concepts of the mines and the ships, which are these very funny, intelligent machines, are magnificent. As we go into the age of AI, I'm reminded of Ian M. Banks. There's a tiny little passage in one short story, I think it is, and the machines are talking to each other, and they're saying, well, why don't we take over the human race? Why don't we just kill all humans? And their answer is because it's so below us. And I love that. I love that. They're not going to kill us because that would be so lame. Is that the best you can do? I like that. Okay.
We've
What
got
else? What else you
9 minutes left in the meeting, and I've got two more questions.
got? Okay.
What is the most surprising thing you've learned while writing books?
I've learned that I have hope. I have a dark personality, dark worldview. And honestly, I thought that's all I was. But I have found that I can use the darkness in me to write the plot as long as it's not a happy end. I don't particularly care for happy, it all got better endings. But that little glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel, if I can finish the book on that, then it feels like hope. Because life is a pain in the butt. Life is full of one problem after another. But that doesn't mean you have to give up. And I found that I feel the best in my writing, and I come away feeling a little bit energized when the characters discover some reason to keep going, some reason to feel that it's getting better. So hope is what I've discovered.
One final question, and this is a personal one. As I have an autism spectrum disorder, I've seen where you raise a son who is autistic, and what is that like?
What is it like? Okay. This is not a snide answer, but it's not like anything. Nothing is like it. It is, you obviously know that autism is a spectrum. My son is high functioning, but he also, he'll pull himself in like the turtle pulling into the shell. And there are times when you just have to keep needling him to keep going. He does speak, he goes to school, but he can get distracted or he can just not do something. And it's frustrating. He's got this super smart mind and I love him, but it's getting through that communication barrier. And I think this is something as a society we have got to take on. I'm looking just at the latest numbers. This is stuff that came out, apparently hasn't changed too much in the last few years. But the CDC says 1 in 54. That is a huge number. That is a huge number. 1 in 54 are on the autistic spectrum. Another report says it's 1%, which is slightly smaller, but even that means 80 million people worldwide are autistic. We better damn well learn to talk to these folks. My first book, which again is about dolphins, but it's really about communication. In all the effort for the dolphins and the humans trying to learn to communicate with each other, there's also an autistic character who is based on what little I understand about my son's condition. So it's about the communication with him as well. I believe that our efforts should be turned to this. Instead of trying to bring them to our world, we better find the bridge that they don't seem to be able to find. Not to get off track, but damn your AI computers. I don't need them replacing white-collar jobs and artists. I need the AI computers to learn forms of communication. I need them turned to that, things that people have not been able to do up to now. This may or may not be on the subject, forgive me. In the 70s, you had Dr. John Lilly. He started a project to try to communicate with the dolphins. I will get back to the main point here. His assistant wound up taking it over, and they had the dolphin house, and she had sort of an interesting relationship with Peter the dolphin. Anyway, what she learned was it was idiotic for the humans to try to teach dolphins English. We needed to be learning their language. And of course, in the 70s, they didn't have computers worth a damn. The UNIVAC would take up an entire room, but not really have a whole lot of computing power. Now we have computers you can hold in your hand that can do this stuff. Maybe observe and find a language pattern for the dolphins. And if we can do that, and we should do that, what about autistic people? I know you have a communication skill, but you probably feel, I'm guessing, you probably feel that separation. Shouldn't we be trying to bridge that separation? I can talk to my son, but there are parts of him that I'm not able to reach. I'd like to be able to reach him. I'd like him to be able to reach across back again. That's where I think our focus should be.
Chris, you were an amazing guest, and I thank you for appearing on the Heartland Author Podcast.
You are absolutely welcome. Thank you for putting up with my crazy opinions on everything.
It was wonderful to interview Chris. I'll also add that for Kindle Unlimited subscribers, Come the Eventide is available on Kindle Unlimited. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write your imagination. Bye for now. You can learn more about me and my book writing projects at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/authoraac. You can follow me on Facebook at AuthorAAC and on Instagram at AACscribe. Copyright 2023, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.